You are listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And today our repeat guest is
Sasha Prokuda.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Sasha, what's your job title? What do you do?
I'm the executive director at the Chicago Council for Science and Technology.
And we're going to be talking today about science communication. So Sasha is a professional in science communication, and the Chicago Council on Science and Technology is to help disseminate science and science information to the general public. And what I'd like to talk about today is why that is so hard.
It is.
So Mallory, Sasha, and I all have PhDs, and we all love science 24/7. Can't get enough of it. And we are just so enthusiastic. We want everybody else to know about all of those really amazing science things that we know about. We would like nothing more than to be able to share our passion for what we do.
Yeah. I've been told when it comes to speaking to people outside of the sciences, like not in a teaching setting, but just like communicating to a friend, that I either talk way above them or way below them, and I'm not very good at striking that middle ground.
So figuring out the audience,
yeah,
figuring out who your audience is and communicating in a way that they can appreciate.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Sasha, what are some of the things that you've learned over the years about how to effectively communicate to the public about science?
It's impossible. No, just kidding.
Well, can we go back to why it's hard? Which might elucidate with some of the how to do it better. Maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's several levels, right, of why science communication is hard. One is translating information that, for example, when you go through a PhD program, you're usually in there for 5 years, maybe more, and that whole time you're just reading a lot of material that's written in jargon. And part of that 5 years is just learning that jargon. It's learning a different language so that then you can understand what has been written.
Which is not easy.
Right. So then you can add to that knowledge. And when you do add to it, you're so fluent in that language that's what you speak in, that's what you write in, that's what the language is.
Yeah, there's a lot of words that I don't realize are science words, and I use them in everyday conversation. And people are like, what? What is that? Like, I'll be like, oh, can you aliquot that? And then they'll be like, allocate? And I'm like, no, aliquot.
Or innervate.
Or innervate. Or lice. Or whatever.
Well, it is true that many of the terms that we use also have a different connotation when used in a scientific context.
Yes.
So that even common words from the English language have a different meaning when we use them to try to describe something scientific. But I do also acknowledge that we forget what we didn't know when we were younger, and we assume that just because we know it, then it's obvious to everybody else.
Yep.
There was an anecdote I remember from when I was in an undergrad at the University of Illinois, and a faculty member was telling me a story about the qualifying exam that they were preparing. And for those of you who haven't experienced one, this is the written exam that you take as a young PhD student to demonstrate that you have sufficient knowledge to remain in the program. And so by passing this exam, you qualify yourself to continue onto a research project. And so a faculty member was thinking about a particular problem, and the question itself was relatively straightforward, but the solution was eluding him. And he continued to think about it for weeks and weeks, and finally one day he had an aha moment. And it's like, oh, the solution is quite obvious and trivial now that he had thought about it, and put the problem on the exam. And then what happened is not a single student was able to solve it, even though in his mind, once he had realized what the solution was, it was obvious and trivial. And I do think that there are a lot of scientists who have this particular bias. Once we know something, it's obvious and trivial, and we forget that it isn't necessarily obvious or trivial to everybody else. And then as a consequence, we come off as completely arrogant.
Oh, ouch. Yeah, that might be true.
And I mean, not just come off as, but are arrogant in some cases.
So we have to get over ourselves.
Yes. I mean, that's definitely a part of it. Also, just like understanding that maybe in a room full of people that you're speaking to, literally no one else had the same experiences that you did, right? Like no
they
one
haven't worked at a particle accelerator?
Right. Yeah, right. Or tediously like raised 3,000 crickets. It's like, who has that experience? Not a lot of people. So you can't just like be like, well, why don't you understand what it's like to feed baby crickets?
You've never done it. Well, it's the same thing as I always say I have a tenuous grasp on the English language, even though it's the only language I speak. But compared to somebody who is a writer or is well versed, it has done like a PhD in Russian literature, like I don't know anything about that compared to them. So if they're just gonna just Dostoevsky me, that's a verb now, I'm probably gonna have a hard time with it, and I have to be considerate going the other way. I think I know that I have a niche in the world, but it's sometimes what I assume the like K through 12 education is on science. I assume people have that foundation, but they don't always have that foundation. I think that makes it more difficult too. Like some people haven't taken a biology class, my field, since like freshman year in high school, and maybe they're 50 or more.
I'm raising my hand because I'm one of those people who hasn't taken a biology class since freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
And that's the other issue, right, is that not everyone is coming in to the table at the same level.
Right.
So even if you did all graduate high school, the quality of the education varies wildly depending on where you grew up and which region you're from. So, and that none of that is your fault.
Right.
It's just the situation you were born into or moved into or whatever, you know. So that's the other thing is like we can be arrogant. That's one thing. We have knowledge that literally no one else has lived.
Right.
Just like every other person in this world.
Right.
And that doesn't make us special or better than anyone else. It just makes us us.
Right.
The unique person that we are. And then there's the problem of the whole educational system, which teaches science in a way that already marginalizes certain members of the community straight off the bat and systematically throughout the years that they're studying it.
Right.
And then on top of that, science is taught in a way that's very just, this is how it is. Here are the facts. You need to memorize it. There's nothing else to it. You know, it's never taught that science is a process. It's evolving. It's how we understand our world. It's not made this beautiful thing that it is to us.
Yeah, there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. And like the whole of being a scientist is like 85% failure, 15% success. So
you have 15% success? That's really good.
I don't know if I always do, but definitely you have to get used to like coming up with ideas and having them not work out, or having a solid idea but not experimentally having something work out. Human error happens too, and you're right. It is taught like this is how a cell divides. This is what a neutron is. And I'm trying to include you, Chris. This is what
it's kind of you.
This
Thank
is
you.
how a
Thank
particle can be accelerated, rather than being like, oh, there were a lot of pitfalls along the way. We didn't understand things. I try to take that approach in the classroom where I talk about like close but miss ideas. So instead of just talking about Darwin, talk about like Lamarck and his ideas for evolution, and then get there, or talk about they used to think like RNA was stupid, but it's the best.
And even Lamarck wasn't that like wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he just had use and disuse, but a general idea was good on him.
And there are things that we pass on from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
I mean, or within the same that changes our DNA.
Oh, yeah, like epigenetics?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wasn't wrong. We just didn't understand it well enough until now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So the concept of Lamarckian evolution, because Chris looks confused.
No, I'm following along. I'm just enjoying the conversation.
Oh, right.
we just did it.
Fell into the same trap.
No. I was really enjoying seeing the two biologists kind of resonating off of each other and sharing a moment where you were you both had these thoughts going on in your head that were very similar, and you were literally resonating with each other on it, and I could sense that absolutely. And so this whole notion of traits being propagated from parent to child based on the lived life. I mean, I get that. I mean, I was kind of taught that when I was young that was not the way it worked, but they did bring it up.
Yeah, so Lamarck's whole use and disuse thing would be like if a giraffe kept stretching its neck to get leaves, the children would be born with longer necks. So it's not like you use a part, it grows, or you don't, and you lose it. But epigenetically, you can inherit fear. Yeah. You can inherit like trauma, generational trauma. Literally changes how your DNA is expressed. So in ways, he was right, but not as simple as like if I go to the gym and get real buff, I'm gonna have a buff baby.
That would be cool. So Sasha,
as far as we know,
the studies are inconclusive. So Sasha, so we've been talking about these various barriers to communicating with the public. Have you found anything that you think works well?
Yes, understanding the audience that you are speaking to definitely helps. So if you're going to be talking to mostly adults, there's some things that you probably have in common and can draw on from your stories and your experiences. I think universally, drawing from your experiences and being relatable as a person is definitely something that's helpful. But the things that you relate with change depending on the audience that you're speaking to.
So you're trying to make a connection, showing that, we have things in common. And if you can create that connection, then people are more open and receptive to listening to what you have to say. Is that
yes?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Or have something to relate it back to for understanding and memory.
Oh, that's a really, really, really good point, Mallory. The whole notion that if I'm going to remember something, you can tell me something in real time, but if I'm going to implant it in my brain and be able to recall it
and use it,
I have to find a way to connect it with my world experience.
Right.
And it makes it more interesting to you too, more understandable, more graspable.
Something you can get your hands on.
So making it relatable and putting concepts into terms and into the world that other people experience, not the laboratory world.
Right.
Because we've been in the laboratory, but other people might not.
Yeah, you're never going to, I tell students when they ask me how to study, that could be a whole nother episode, but I say things like, you're never going to remember just a bunch of discrete facts. If you don't know how they connect to each other, it's impossible. Like your brain isn't a set of flashcards.
Yeah.
One of the assignments I often will give, especially if I'm teaching, freshman or sophomore level science, is to ask the students, okay, your assignment for today is to go out into your world, just regular world, and try to identify these physical concepts that we're discussing in class that are happening around you. And
so they all go look for swinging pendulums.
No.
Oh. That's the only thing about physics. No.
But conservation of energy, maybe. Right?
Sure.
So from my perspective, if you bring a pendulum, the first thing that would pop into my head is the conversion of energy back and forth between kinetic energy and potential energy. So then I would ask the students, okay, this is, this pendulum is demonstrating, energy movement from potential to kinetic and back. And can you see other examples of energy flow in the world around you? And that's how I would try to approach it.
Yeah. Like a diver climbing up to the top of a diving board, kinetic to potential, diving off, potential to kinetic.
Exactly. I remember having a class where assignment was to go out and take photographs of stuff that document a particular concept. And then the assignment was to submit the photograph along with an explanation of how a particular type of energy was being manifest in the photo.
Wow. That's kind of fun.
I'm not sure the students felt exactly the same way. They're like, what? Can we just like do some equations, please?
You're like, no, take pretty pictures.
Yeah. An example of choosing your audience.
Oh, getting us back on track.
Yes. Is so we went to
somebody has to.
We went to a festival, a science festival, where we had hands-on activities, and we had two activities, right? One was to create your own meteor. And we had like little streamers that you could add to your meteor that represent the dust trail and blah, blah, blah. And then the other one, and you could like twirl it around afterwards and it was fun. And then the other one was we brought some old records that we got from like an old store or whatever, and it was like 25 cents per record. We had no idea what was on them, but we brought records, and then we had people create their own gramophone or record player out of like a piece of paper that you curled up into a cone, and then you stuck a needle through the end of the cone, and then you would spin the record on like a pencil or a pen, like it would in a gramophone, and then you drop the needle and you could hear the music coming out of the cone.
Or the propaganda.
Way. That works?
It does.
You know what I'm doing tonight?
You do scratch up your record, so I would not.
No, okay. Wow. I gotta go try that.
It's very tinny sounding, and there's a lot of, obviously, noise and static that comes along with it.
Yeah, but the fact that it works at all.
Right. Amazing, right? So we did it, and we had kids do it, and we had their parents do it. And guess who liked it more or was fascinated by it?
The parents.
Uh-huh. Because they're like, oh my God, that's how it works? Whereas the kids were like, what is this even?
Give them a CD and have them try the same thing.
They're like, this secret technology.
Oh my gosh.
It definitely wouldn't work with a CD.
So Sasha, as we get near the end, what final words of advice might you have for people who are interested in being more effective when they're communicating science to non-scientists?
I guess try to find your inner child, like how you were before you learned this language. How would you explain it to, someone that you really love and you want them to understand what it is you work on, what research you do, and to relate it to their lives so they can actually get excited with you about what it is you're doing.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to think about doing it. And then if somebody wants to become a scientist, it's important to remember, like, we weren't born this way. We had to learn it too, so other people can learn it too. So the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Lewis University. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Lewis University name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. This podcast was produced in the WLRA podcast studios at Lewis University. Visit lewisu.edu for more information about Lewis University. You've been listening to Science Coast with Mallory Havens and
Chris White.
And today,
Sasha Prokuda.
Thanks.
See you next time. Bye.